Hi everyone. In this video, we're actually going to be working with knowing how to multiply polynomials. So the first few problems, we're going to multiply 2 by 2, which are binomials by binomials, and then the last two problems are going to be binomials, which are 2 by trinomials, which are 3. So 2 by 3. So when we focus on multiplying polynomials, the first thing we have to always remember is, how do I even know I'm multiplying? Well, one thing you want to focus on is, what do you see between the two parentheses? If you look at the two parentheses, you should see no symbol, which technically means you're actually multiplying these two terms to these two terms. And when we're talking about multiplying, the word that should come to mind is called distributing. So we're going to be distributing this and this to these two parentheses. So how should we focus on this? Well, the first thing I always recommend is, when you're looking at this, ask yourself, what's the first thing I should distribute? So what I want you to do is I want you to cover the second term. If you cover the second term in the first parentheses, that means you're distributing x to x and 4. And whenever we distribute, what you want to do is you want to draw arrows. X times x and x times 4. And then after you distribute x to both terms, you're going to take that piece of paper or that whatever you're covering up, and you're going to cover up the first term in the first parentheses so that you can focus on the -5 and distribute the -5 to the x and the -5 to the 4. Now, once you distribute all the terms, you'll have everything lined up, and that's how you multiply a 2 by 2. So, you ready? Let's begin. So first thing we're going to do, again, we're going to cover the second term in the first parentheses, and we're going to do x times x, but we always said that if we're going to multiply variables, we should add exponents. So I'm going to add a 1 here and a 1 here. I do that because when I do x1 times x1, don't forget the rule, you add the exponent, so 1 will give me 2. So this is going to turn out to become x squared. Next, I'm going to do x1 times 4, but they have nothing in common. X and 4 don't have anything in common, so when you multiply them, it's just going to be stuck together as positive 4x because they're both positive. Now, once I distribute the x to the x and the 4, I'm technically done because I have two terms, so I'm going to move this, and I'm going to cover up the left side because now I'm going to focus on the -5. -5 times x, again, they don't have anything in common, so just stick them together. It's going to be -5x, and then -5 times 4 is going to be -20 because I could actually multiply two numbers. Now, after I multiply, I wish I was done, but I'm not, because what? I have to combine like terms. My terms in the middle are usually going to be similar. So if I have to combine like terms, I'm looking for variables to be the same, x and x. So when I combine this 4x and 5x, you subtract, you're going to get -x. Now, since x squared and -20 doesn't have anything similar, you're just going to drop it down. So it'll be x squared minus x and then -20 because you drop these two down. And that's your final answer. So when you multiply a 2 by 2, it's going to end up becoming a trinomial if you have similar terms, like we did here. Now, sometimes you're going to get terms to cancel out. It all depends on the situation, okay? So again, whenever you have two parentheses being multiplied, I recommend in the beginning, cover one term so you can distribute, okay? So now when we move on to the next example, we're going to say simplify. Okay, so what does that mean? Are we adding? Are we subtracting? Are we multiplying? Well, since both terms are technically, both parentheses are next to each other with no symbol in the middle, you're going to notice there's technically a multiplication symbol. So because I'm multiplying, I want to put an exponent on the x's so it helps me out. So again, with the same strategy, I'm distributing these two to these two. So since I'm distributing the first two, let's cover one up. And I'm going to multiply x times x, so x1 times x1, I hope you agree, is x2. And x1 times 3 is going to be 3x. How do I know? Because x times 1, x1 is, add them up, 2. x1 times 3, there's nothing in common, so just combine them and you get 3x. Now once I'm done, I'm going to cover up the first term. I'm going to focus on -3. And it's going to be -3 times x, which is, again, stick them together because they're the same term, so it'll be -3x. And then -3 times +3 is going to be -9. Now, once I multiply everything out, you're going to notice I have x1 times x1 is x squared, x1 times 3 is 3x, -3 times x is -3x, -3 times 3 is -9. Ask yourself, do I have similar terms that I can combine? And you're going to notice we do. We have 3x and -3x. Well, 3 minus 3 is 0. How do I write that? I'm not going to put 0x, that's strange, so I'm just going to cancel them out because they cancel out, and I'm going to drop down the other terms, which are x squared minus 9. Notice in this one, I had a 2 by 2, but I ended up with 2 terms. Why? Because the middles ended up canceling out, which happens when these are opposites. And that's because this is a difference of 2 squares, which you'll learn at a later time. Okay. Now for example 3, again, when you feel confident, try to do it on your own. Pause the video and then play it. On example 3, you're going to notice that there's numbers in front of the variables, which are perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice that I'm multiplying these two. I'm going to put an exponent of 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and multiply. So 2x1 times 3x1 is going to be numbers with numbers, variables with variables. 2 times 3 is 6. x1 times x1 is x squared. Remember, add the exponents. Then multiply 2x1 times 6. Numbers with numbers, 2 times 6 is 12. And then x1 has nothing to multiply with, so it just comes down. Notice I didn't put the 1 because I already didn't have to multiply it. Now, once I'm done distributing the first term to the first two, I'm going to go to the negative 5. Negative 5 times 3, number with number, is negative 15. There's an x, so just drop the x down. And then negative 5 times 6 is going to be negative 30. Now, once you're done distributing, ask yourself, can I combine like terms? And I can. The 12x and the negative 15 are similar. So 12 minus 15 is negative 3. And then I'm going to drop down the 6x squared because there's nothing to combine it with, as well as the negative 30. And that's my final answer. Okay, so now moving on to example 4. Now in example 4, we're going to notice that now we have a binomial multiplied by a trinomial. Now the unfortunate part is that we're actually going to be doing this a bunch more times, meaning that it's not going to just be 4 terms like we were in the last one. Why? Because when I multiply this first term, x, I have to distribute x to x squared, 5x, as well as negative 6. So that's 3 different terms. So if I do negative 3, I'm also going to get 3 different terms, which means I'm going to get 6 terms in total on my next line. So let's go ahead and do it. Add a 1 wherever you can add an exponent where it's missing. x1 times x2, add them up, is x3. x1 times 5x, remember 5 has no number to multiply with, so just drop down the 5. x1 is x2. x1 times negative 6 has nothing in common, so just go ahead and stick them together. You're going to get negative 6x. Now once you're done distributing the first term to all 3 terms, move on to the second term. Distribute negative 3 to x squared, and you're going to get negative 3x squared. Why? Because they have nothing in common, so just stick them together. Negative 3 times 5x, I can actually multiply negative 3 and 5 to get negative 15. But there's an x, so you just drop it down. And the last one, negative 3 times negative 6. 2 numbers to multiply them, you get positive 18. Now once you're here, you're going to notice how many terms do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like we said. So combine like terms, notice x3 is by itself, so drop it. Cross it out once you're done. 5x squared looks similar to negative 3x squared. 5 minus 3 is going to be positive 2. Leave the x squared as is. Don't add exponents because you're not multiplying. When you're adding and subtracting, the exponents stay the same. Once you combine it, cross it off. Negative 6x, negative 15x, negative, negative, you add. So you're going to get negative 21x. Cross it off once you're done. And 18 has no other similar term, so just drop it. And you get positive 18. And that's your final answer. So when you're multiplying a 2 by 3, you're going to get technically that number of terms. Okay? All right. So for our last one is one I want you to try on your own. I want you to see if you can do it. Pause the video, attempt it. Be careful but organized. Okay. So in this problem, I noticed that I'm multiplying the 2 by 3. So I'm going to put a 1 on all the exponents that don't have an exponent. I'm going to stay organized, so I'm going to distribute this first term to all 3 terms on this side. 3x times x squared, multiply numbers with numbers, variables, variables. 3 times no number is going to be 3. x1, x2 is x cubed. 3x times 5x, number with number, 3 times 5 is 15 positive. And x1 is x2. So that's my second term. My third term, I'm going to do 3x1 times 10. 3 times 10 is 30. And then x1 is by itself, so just drop out on the x1, which you don't have to write x1, you can just write x. Now you move on to negative 2. So negative 2 times x squared, they have nothing in common, so just stick them together. Negative 2 times 5x, negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. There's an x, so just drop it down. and then negative 2 times positive 10 is going to be negative 20. Now, once I have that, my next step is to ask myself, is there similar terms? There's nothing with 3x cubed, so just drop it down. Cancel it out so you don't get confused. There's a 15x and a negative 2x squared. 15 minus 2 is going to be 13. Cross it off once you're done. I have a 30x and a negative 10x. 30 minus 10 is going to be 20, positive. Keep the x, remember, don't add them because you're not multiplying. Cross it off, and then I'm ending up with negative 20, which means I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down. And that's my final answer. So hopefully you got this right, but remember, in order for you to multiply, you have to be super careful with the signs and your exponents. And then remember, numbers go with numbers and variables go with variables. Thank you for watching and best of luck.